What is going on, everyone? Hey, 1, 2. What's up, everyone? How you guys doing? Welcome back to Building Worlds with yours truly, Rodolfo Silva. Oh wow, the camera is a little bright, isn't it? Let me know if the audio is alright. I have to readjust the audio every time. Let me change the exposure here a little bit. There we go. What's going on? Is the audio, is the music too loud, or is it okay? If it's okay, we'll start. Whoops, daisy. Wrong one. There we go. Hey, so today I thought we're gonna keep doing some of the trees for our scene, and we're almost finished, you guys. I have to tell you, it's just detailing the spaceship, and then we should be ready to go. Basically, the scene is finished. So here's the thing. Last week we did the tree itself, and then we didn't do this part. We kind of did like the basic shape for the sort of clusters, right? For the leaves and all that. And I'm gonna run through the process again because I know that it was kind of confusing last week. There was a couple of questions that came in my DMs asking if I could go into a little bit more detail, doing foliage and stuff. And let me know, you guys, if you want me to show you actually more of a game ready approach to foliage, because it's kind of different than what I'm doing here. I'm thinking this more for like a render or some like 3D printing. Maybe it could be used for that. And what I did then was I added another layer of complexity on top, which is kind of like leaf mesh just scattered around the cluster and the actual formation of the tree. And this is pretty straightforward, just requires some sort of like ingenuity behind like the planning, let's say. So I'm using Nanomesh for this, but because it's a very chaotic kind of leaf scattering system that allows me to do a lot of this stuff, and you can still get away with having your base kind of cluster mesh behind it, and then just spread like a tileable texture on it if you're enthused on that, and just do some cool like procedural texturing in Substance Designer somewhere like that, and then just scatter it around. I also have some poly paint, not a whole lot, but in this case I did have a texture here ready, which is I just brought it in from Megascans, just a surface, right, with some like leaves scattered. It's actually a forest ground kind of texture. Then I tweaked it here under the texture palette, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that basically from scratch. So hello, Rodolfo, sounds good. All right, so if the audio is okay, then, well, if it wasn't, you wouldn't have heard anything I just said, so. Last week I was a little sick too, so my stream was kind of dull in a sense. I was a little sick, but you know, I had it scheduled, and I don't like to break my word. So if I miss a stream or something, you guys know that there's definitely something wrong. You know. So, oh, also I forgot to do the plug. I'm sorry. I know this part is kind of awkward, but I'm gonna post on chat if you guys wanna follow me on Instagram or on the Discord server. There's a link there for the Discord server. You can ask questions, post work in progress pictures, and post your portfolio as well, so you can have it reviewed, or just post it to get reach, right? So whatever the reason, doesn't matter. It's just that if you post the work in progress, there's also a lot of artists there that are currently there doing, and they could just pitch in, do some feedback. So if you guys are willing to get some feedback and improve your work, just be sure to join that server. And I have some stuff planned for that server in the near future. Just stay tuned from January on, I'm gonna go and do an update on that. So on that whole front in the war that is ZBrush teaching. Hello, Harsh. That's a nice name, Harsh. On top of me, of course. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so join the Discord server. There's gonna be a lot of stuff, interesting stuff coming, especially for you guys who are into like video game art and modeling and texturing for games. That there's gonna be some pretty cool stuff there. All right, so back to our little tree here. One of the things I did last stream was I actually brought in a Megascans asset, which is this kind of tree trunk thing over here, right? This is a scan from Megascans, so if you don't know, I use this all the time to just create brushes and create alphas and all sort of stuff. So if you go and open up this little app over here called the Quixel Bridge, it's basically free if you have an Epic Games account. So if you download Unreal Engine or something like that, you get a free account, and there's a ton of like actual free assets that you don't even need an account for that. So you can also start by that. What I usually do is I go to like home and just search for like either like 3D assets or actual surfaces, which is basically textures and materials, right? So what I do is I download some of these, but sometimes this really doesn't work for what I want because I want a brush or something. So I sometimes I actually get the scan data, like the raw scan data. So for example, in this scenario, what I did was I went over here to nature, and then there's like, for example, this tree unrooted, which I could just do with an extractor brush. I could just extract a piece of this and then just use it as a brush. You have some twigs over here, some fallen tree trunks, but then you have your regular actual like tree stumps and trunks. So this is what I usually use. So download some of these, and then once you open it up in ZBrush, what you can do is actually go over here using our extractor brush. And I'm not sure if this is gonna lag, guys, so if it lags a little bit, just be patient, because this takes its toll on the CPU, and my CPU is rather new. So just press the G key and then just drag a piece of this, like a path, let's say, through this texture. Yeah, I know I'm lagging. Unreal Engine. Yes, Unreal Engine. So this is Quixel used to be like its own company. Let's say it was bought out by Epic Games a few years ago, and now they have like the Megascans library, which if you use Unreal Engine, you know that they have their whole like scan data in the marketplace and stuff like that. I use that all the time to create ZBrush assets actually, and since it's free, it's like you could just get it, right? It's not free if you're earning more than like $1 million a year with your products from Epic Games. Then you have to pay like 5% royalties or something like that. But for users like us, just using those assets to create some ZBrush assets, basically, some brushes, some alphas, some tolerable textures to use in our models and stuff like that, then it's okay. And it looks like it's crashing. I'm pretty sure it won't crash. It's just extracting the data from what I just drew on the surface. The more polygons you have, the longer this is going to take, because it's basically baking on the fly. Yeah. Well, if you like ZBrush, Unreal Engine, and Substance, you need to go into our server, because there's some stuff coming in the future, and I promise you it's gonna be free. That I can promise. It's part of a Maxon thingy, so come on over. Let's just wait a little bit longer. It goes white. The screen sometimes goes white, but then you have to tell it to wait a little bit. And yeah, extractor brush always gets this a little laggy, but it's usual, it's normal. I could have decimated it actually, because decimation actually cleans up a lot of the amount of polygons that it has, and you can still get. It's also harder to get the geometry when it's an open mesh. That's also a thing. When it's an open mesh, it usually takes longer. That's one of the things I figured, and I forgot to close the holes basically. Let's just hope that it isn't. Whoops. Yeah, I think it is working. It's just taking its toll. My CPU has 18 cores, 18 threads, actually. 18 threads? 16 threads, I'm not sure. Yeah, 16 threads, that's it. And it's still like 80%. There you go. Oh no, I forgot one thing. This happens to me all the time. I always forget. This is the extracted alpha, which actually might work though. Let's see. So I usually test this out in like a sphere or something. Let me go over here. This is my test sphere, which I did last week, if you guys remember from the last stream. So if I don't just brush this in to the surface, you can see I'm basically brushing in that information that I extracted from the brush. So now I can actually just start doing this to get like the pattern of like bark, which is super cool. And then I can actually come over here with my trim dynamic just to flatten this out a little bit, and then extract it again actually, so I can actually sculpt this. This is showing environment, right? What do you mean showing environment? You mean an Unreal Engine? So much with my ZBrush. Yeah, but it's normal. Like, you just wait a little bit, because it's like Windows. If you're on Windows, this happens a lot, because Windows has like a timer, let's say. So when an app doesn't, let's say anything to the graphics card, the drivers kind of freeze. So it's a driver thing, and it's on Windows. So you just have to tell it to wait. As long as this little thing shows you that ZBrush is still using some of the CPU, then you're fine, basically. If it says 0 CPU usage, then it's crashed, basically. So basically, you have something like this. So go back to our extractor brush, and we can tweak now. Tweak the information here, to tweak the brush itself. So one of the things I usually do is I go over here and I dock my brush palette on the side right over here, and I dock my alpha palette as well, because this is an alpha in essence. So we're going to tweak the alpha. If we go down here in our alpha palette and go to modify, we can actually tweak the range of the alpha on the fly. So for now, let me just insert another sphere over here, just a clean sphere. And let's just go into solo mode and Nanomesh and start sculpting this. Okay. So if we move the mid value up, it's going to give us basically, it's basically telling you the mid value should be either white, black, or gray, which is like 50%, right? If it's 100%, it's going to give you basically an indent. If it's 0, in this case, everything else is going to be overblown, basically. So let me just do a higher resolution over here. There we go. Yeah. So what I need actually is a mid value that's a little raised, but then I want to blur the details, so I don't have as much details over there. And then I want to up the contrast a little bit. So this goes after the fact. And this is what's going to happen. It still has some noise, so what I could do is actually go over here to alpha adjust and just adjust this alpha that you see over here. So you can see it's basically a levels. If you've toyed around with Photoshop, it's basically what I'm doing here. So now it has a lot of contrast over there. So what I want in this case scenario is I want to flatten them. So I want to maybe raise this min value and lower this max value. So I have something like this. So maybe I want to raise this up a little bit and do something like that. Let's see what's going on. So actually, let me lower this contrast a little bit. There we go. So we can start tweaking our alpha. And once you save the brush, it saves the alpha as well. So it saves the brush, the stroke, and the alpha palette. So those three things, like if you want to make your own brushes, you need to understand sort of like these three tabs, which is the stroke, the brush, and the alpha palette. So after we tweak the alpha, now I'm going to go down to the brush palette, and what I usually like to do is I want to go over to here to the depth and lower the depth a little bit. So now it sculpts in, so it's kind of like the influence of where the brush is sculpting. It's basically doing this, and if I press Alt, it's going to give me a different result. And we're going to raise the intensity a little bit, so we can have a little bit of something like this. Let me go back to my alpha over here, and let's try some max settings. No, actually max is going to do the opposite of what I want. So let me blur it to push this to 2. There we go. There we go. And I want to maybe do something like this. Not this. I want something like this maybe. Yeah, you can see it's kind of maxing out those values, which I don't want. So maybe I want something like this. So it's flattening that area over there. So might want to do this and maybe push this to be like flat. So you're gonna get something like that, right? So it's basically you're tweaking your curves in Photoshop. It's sort of like that. How can you make a world in ZBrush? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I mean, I am an environment artist. So yeah, so that's what I usually do. I have some training in anatomy. I did classical drawing for over 8 years, but my area of expertise is environments, yes. Real-time environments for that matter. Let me just, I don't really like this music, sorry. Yeah, you can do environment art. Again, it's a good place for you to be is on our Discord server. I posted a link in chat. Because and a lot, especially in environments, because I know a lot of people are character artists are on the server, but if you're doing environments, that's literally my area of expertise. So you're in the right place. So yeah, I did a couple of previous streams where I went through techniques on creating tileable textures in ZBrush, trim sheets, which is all like for environment art, basically. So yeah. All right, so we have this now, which is not exactly what I want. So maybe let's raise this up a little bit. Maybe do something like this. Nope. Maybe something like that. There we go. Or maybe we could actually have this as a curve over there. Let me put the mid value at 50 and drop the AA. Yeah, it would get something like this, or maybe you don't want something like that, so maybe you want this flipped over. This is basically the same as pressing Alt. So we could go like this. Let's see what's going on. So let's try. Let's try something like that. Yeah, this kind of works actually. So we could lower the intensity a little bit. And this time I'm gonna save this brush, all right? So we have this extracted from a realistic Megascans asset. So we can actually start just doing stylized bark everywhere. And then we can mix and match that with a clay polish brush, which is gonna be what we're gonna do for our tree. In essence, that's what I did for this little thingamajig over here. So that tree trunk over there is going to clip, and you can see what's going on. Let me just turn off the poly paint. So basically just start brushing away with that newly created extractor brush, and then just run a clay polish with some details, and then you can go in with some orbs, cracks, or dam standard and hand sculpt kind of the veins, etc. But you don't need a lot of detail, like especially for a scene this size, which is like a lot of the detail could come in from the actual painting. You're going to be out of a job. No, I'm not, Yuri. I mean, it's cool. I like sharing. I like sharing knowledge. You know, so to be an environment artist, where do I start from? Which software you prefer for big? I mean, you have a big advantage if you know ZBrush, because one of the things that you're going to find out if you're going to go through the environment artist course, let's say, is that if you need to know a DCC app like Cinema 4D, Maya, Blender, whatever you want for your, let's say, more technical side of the modeling process, right? But then you need to know ZBrush, because a lot of the stuff that you're going to do is in ZBrush, especially if you're modeling and texturing, right? Because environment art has a lot of different kind of specialties and specialisms and stuff. So in essence, you need to know ZBrush, Substance Painter, and something like Cinema 4D, Maya, Blender, or whatever. That's your starting point. So you know how to do models and bake them and texture them. That's your starting point. So focus on props first, right? If you know how to do props, you're in a good path, let's say, towards making environments. Because environments are, in essence, a bunch of props, you know. So with the terrain. So there's terrain, which is a whole different story. So, first and foremost, let me save this brush, because then I always forget about this. So I'm going to save extractor. Let's save as. Going to save, let's call this extractor bark. There we go. And now, one of the things I did, this is sort of using ZSpheres and ZSketch to start creating the trees, the tree kind of veins and formation, right? So we could do the same thing. Oh, Jesus, no, this isn't right. Let me go to Sketch, ZSketch, optimize. Yeah, it's relative size, basically. There we go. So it could start, you can even just delete a lot of this and then just restart. This is why I use ZSketch for trees, because I can easily just go over here, delete just a couple of these tubes, and then create a completely different tree with the same kind of skeleton, let's say. So this is old, by the way. This has been in ZBrush since forever. I wasn't even a ZBrush artist when this was on. So yeah, it's old. So there we go. I'm gonna do this like that. And one thing, once you finish doing props, basically, once you know how to do props, the next step for you would be to learn an engine. We're talking Unreal, Unity, whatever. But learn somewhere where you're gonna bring that all together. So if you're doing rendering, if you're doing VFX, learn terrain generation. Learn something like Gaia, World Machine, GeoGen, which is a new one that's coming out from the creators of Embergen, Younger Effects. Learn something to generate terrains, and learn ZBrush for that, which is a little different, right? So there's ZBrush in itself, which kind of works as sort of like your Play-Doh, right? Like clay. But then there's ZBrush for production, which is a whole different thing. So if you're into environments, what you need to learn how to do is not only texturing, so textures in ZBrush, but also how to tweak environment assets in ZBrush. So you have your terrain, for example, and you want to add some clipping like cliff formations and stuff like that to your terrain. So you need to understand how to make those in ZBrush, and that's a little bit more advanced. But your first steps should definitely be props, first and foremost, and then you focus on the rest of the environment art, because that's one of the things actually that captivated me when it comes to environments, is that it is a lot more demanding in a sense, because you're required to know all of these different tools, which could be, it depends on the type of person you are, right? But I like knowing a lot of stuff, so a lot of different tools, a lot of different software, and one of the things I got from Escape, for example, was the ability to learn a bunch of different software for the same purpose, which would be to do environments, right? Try, yes, there we go. So I'm just trying to come up with some, let me do sketch 1, come up with some like interesting trunk formations. Let me do armature over here and just get some of those like really cool like roots coming out. Let me just smooth this out. And then we can also use the new anchor brushes to tweak these to make it look more realistic, more like what we want. Realistic in a sense, right? Yay, ZSpheres, exactly. ZSpheres, I think, are underappreciated in ZBrush. You know, like Z-sketching and all that sort of thing. I'm actually surprised because I remember when I first started watching some ZBrush tutorials back in like who knows when, and I was too intimidated by ZBrush. This is like 2012 or something. I remember watching a lot of the tutorials back then. Was literally almost all of the characters that you would see would start from either ZSpheres or like a cube or something like that, you know, because there was no Dynamesh. This was like ZBrush 3.5 or something, ZBrush 4. I think Dynamesh was introduced in ZBrush 4 R2 or R3 if I'm not mistaken, and from then on Dynamesh just changed the whole game. But this is still, I like going old school sometimes. So yeah, you have something like this. I'm not going to spend too much time over here because otherwise the whole stream would just be modeling. Not that I care, because I like trees and I like modeling stuff, organic nature stuff. So, but you get the point. So you basically do your sculpting in a less destructive way. You're sculpting the little tubes of like the spiraling tree details and stuff like that. We can mix and match this with actually sculpting in using the clay brush, and I'm going to show you what I usually do with the clay brush to make it more viable for bark. So I also tweak the clay brush, the clay buildup brush actually, to do this. So we'd have something maybe like this, so it doesn't, like the silhouette doesn't look as faceted. I have something like that as well. Yeah, I'm just worried about the silhouette more than anything else. So yeah, if you press A, you're gonna get something like this, which is not necessarily what we want. I don't want Dynamesh. This is the thing I don't want, because I want to Dynamesh this after the fact. And yeah, you might want to, since you're using sketch like ZSketch, we need to actually finish this up. We need to have something there, because the Z-sphere armature is only going to serve, you have to think of this like an actual clay sculptor. so you have your own like wire armature, and then once you put clay in, you're not, it's not like the armature is part of the sculpt, you know what I mean? You're using default UI for ZBrush. I think almost everyone use their own. Well, it is a little customized. Like this top section here is not the same as the default. So if I go over here to config, restore standard UI, you can see it's a little different. It's auto-saving now. It shouldn't be turned on actually. Ah, there you go. So this is the default UI, right? But I use my own UI because I have some custom menus over here that I press all the time. Like Control V for me just opens up this whole range of settings. So I have, and usually I tell my students that it's a good idea to them to learn how to make their own custom UI early on, because if you're creating your own custom like sub palette and palette, you're forced to understand what the tools do and what the buttons do, because when you organize your own UI, you kind of have a functionality for it in mind, right? So you think, all right, I need the ZBrush and let's say polygroups, auto groups or something close to each other. Why? Because you have a particular workflow that goes, it's like you're making your own macros, you know? When you make your own macros, you kind of have the step by step in your mind crystal clear, right? So making your own custom UI goes a long way for you to understand the actual interface in ZBrush. So it's like when I do teach ZBrush in schools and stuff, it's like my second class is how to customize ZBrush, because to me that was super useful when I learned it from Michael. So yeah. Without a doubt, simple is more often the best start. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that, especially with something as complex as like trees or foliage and stuff like that. So yeah, you can see what's going on. So basically anything that's at the actual armature of the ZSphere is not going to be included, so I might as well just do some, and then we can always actually tweak this after the fact. I don't think I did this on the other tree, but I am gonna do this on this one. Actually, let me try something. Let me do Dynamesh actually. It kind of works better because you can see like where some of the veins and bark veins are gonna go. So I'm gonna go with this one. Yeah, actually, let me try unified skin. There we go. Let's make a unified skin. And now once we insert this over here, don't sculpt on this because this is the ZSpheres. So we have something like this, right? So let me go and first and foremost just do some polishing actually. I'm gonna go and do some polish, do some polish by features. Just polish by features, actually. Just a regular polish. There we go. And let's just re-Dynamesh this. There we go. Okay, so you have sort of like our flow over here established. This is actually kind of too chunky. I could have tweaked this a little better, but it works for what we want, right? So the clay buildup, I change this alpha usually to something like, where is it? To something like this, which is more like it works kind of more like a DEM standard brush, but it isn't actually a DEM standard brush. And then I go over to the brush palette. I loaded the custom UI, so I dock the brush palette over here and go to depth, and I wanted to influence actually a little underneath, not the clay buildup, I'm sorry. Clay buildup should be higher a little bit. Let's up the gravity a little bit. There we go, and tilt this ever so slightly. So now we have something like this. Actually, this alpha it's a little too harsh, so let's try something, yeah, something like this. So now we have an actual clay brush that kind of polishes that surface. You see what's going on over there? So this is what I usually do. This is my aid brush for bark veins and stuff like that. So, and I use this in conjunction with the trim dynamic. So I trim it a little bit over there because it, especially if you have this clunky kind of mesh happening over here. Is the Discord invite link in all my links working for anyone? Is it not working? Let me see. Huh, it isn't. Okay, let me check that for you. Let me just go over here and invite, copy that link. Never. Yeah, so yeah, it should have a new link now. It expired. That's the thing. I can't, for some reason, make it never expire. Try it again now. I changed the link. I should have done that before stream. Sorry. There we go. Yeah. So let me post that again and see if it works now. So I posted the links on chat. So be sure to let me know if it's working or not. So, and we can press Alt and alternate between doing stuff like this and Nanomesh. And you can see this is super clunky. This, I mean, I could have done a better job with but what this brush does, like, this is just a clay buildup, right? So here's the thing about ZBrush. ZBrush only has like a handful of brushes, technically. So technically, if you go over a brush over here, you can see right there where it says the name, you can see what it's called a base type. So there's only like, I would say like a dozen of brushes. You know, so basically this is the snake hook brush. The cloth hook is the snake hook, as you can see. Chisel 3D is a single layer brush. So if you go to clay, the mallet is a type of clay. So there's a clay type of brush. There's polish, there's clay, there's standard, there's just like like 12 of them, you know, something like that. Then everything else is variations of that brush. So basically you only need to tweak some values in the brush palette, the stroke and the alpha, to make a completely different brush. But you have to start with the correct base type of brush. So I wanted a clay brush, and then I sort of changed its behavior, you know. So that's literally it. There's no big science, but here's the spoiler thing. I don't know if you guys knew that, but yeah, ZBrush only has like 12 to 20 brushes. When something new comes along, like the anchor brushes, that's when it's a game changer, because usually if you have a new type of brush, that means you can also tweak that and make your own variation of that. So you have all these different possibilities now to create all sorts of different crazy brushes, you know, from something new like the anchor brush. I don't know if you guys saw that, like the presentation, ZBrush 2024. Yeah, the anchor brushes are awesome. I love them. So yeah, let me just do some quick trim dynamic, just so I get rid of this weirdness over here. Let me just Nanomesh this to a lower point so it's faster, because I don't want to bore you guys too much. So, and what we can do, here's the cool thing about the anchor brushes, is that you look at this and it's like, oh, it looks like freaking spaghetti noodles or something. And if you want to make this more like it would when it comes to like the tree roots should be, you know, more wiggly, not as straight as this. So I could now, after the fact, use the anchor brush, just tap and tap here and go. Actually, I prefer to move and rotate. So I could just rotate this after the fact, and then, whoops, not that. And then maybe have something like that. And whoops. It works based on the camera as well. So yeah, so you have something like this, and then you can also have, like, let's say, inflate and deflate this to make it more, whoops, maybe actually scale it. Let's try scale. Yeah, scale makes it thinner, and deflate it a little bit, and you can tweak the focal shift to make it, you know, maybe in the middle. Maybe you want some variation here, so maybe I want, let's say, I want these bumps over here to be kind of bulgy, but then in the middle I don't want it to be that bulgy, so I'm going to push my focal shift to the middle point. And if I inflate this now, it's going to deflate the middle part. So it's basically the gradient is in the middle. So I'm going to do this, re-Dynamesh, and I can Dynamesh on the fly while I'm doing this. So there we go. Then I have another point over there, do the same thing, and let's just focal shift -100. If I do that, it's the opposite way, right? So if I do this, you can see what's going on, right? So yeah, this is the anchor brushes. So it's simple to use, and it's rather nifty. Oh, it's working. All right, thank you. So this is the tree, Zen01. I mean, your names, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your names. But yeah, this is a tree. So I'm basically modeling the actual trunk like we did last week. But last week I was a little sick, so I didn't go into too much detail over this. Even the brushes, I kind of skimmed over that. So first time I did a stream while I was sick, so I hope you guys forgive me for that. So yeah, let's do something like this. Dynamesh. Here's the cool thing. Now we have that brush, right? Let me go to the extractor. Not this, actually. Actually, yeah, it's the extractor bark. But it kind of replaced my extractor brush. Doesn't matter, right? So my extractor bark, I can now use it to kind of have just a slight texture of the tree. So you'd have something like this, right? You just smooth out the surface, so I don't need for this demo, kind of. So yeah, you'd have something like this, and then most of what you're seeing over here you're not going to see because of the foliage, right? So you could have this kind of smooth out. It's the trunk, the base of the trunk that I'm worried about. So we could have stuff like this and then just push this really hard so it goes a little crazy, because then we're gonna sculpt after the fact on this. And for those of you who might be watching that are my students, you know I'm a big right click fan. I'm just doing this because my tablet, for some reason my pen is like the click is kind of ruined. So I might need to get a new pen. So that's why I'm tapping the document over here to rotate the camera. So let me just go over and do some patterns over here. And let me sculpt this section over here so it's not as weird. And now you can complement this with actually coming over and emphasizing this with the clay buildup brush. And then we can also use the cracks brush and really run through this. And now one of the things I usually do early on is I tap this, so I know I have like that little history marker over there. I go to clay polish, I raise the sharpness to like 50, raise the repeat sharpness to like 50, then soft is 100%, and I'm gonna repeat the softness to like 40. And if I go clay polish, This is probably too much, so maybe not as much softness. Let me see. Actually, maybe I'm gonna make it a little softer. Control H to hide this. Just tweaking these values. Let me try something a little different. Maybe the repeat softness shouldn't be. There we go. Yeah, the repeat sharpness. So you'd have something like this, and now we can start detailing. We start coming over here, and again, the geometry is all wonky now, so I'm gonna make another marker over there, and basically just re-Dynamesh this, and now go up here to Subtool, Project History. I'm gonna project back all the details, but the geometry won't be all squished and squashed. That's what clay polish does usually. And let me just work out some of these veins. But yeah, so this is basically my process for hand sculpting trees. I know this has been too quick, and it's an ugly looking tree, but that's what I usually do. I sculpt then the trunk, primarily the trunk, because the rest won't be seen. Unless it's a game tree, then you really want to have this really well sculpted, because otherwise because it depends, right? Depends on your environment. One of the environments I'm working on an article for that environment. It's an open world environment in Unreal. And the trees there have two variations. They have like the naked tree, which doesn't have any leaves and clusters and all of that, and the full foliage tree. And my plan was to add like seasons later down the line. So I would create a blueprint and shaders and material parameters to control like the seasons on the trees. So you'd have like the trees with snow, because they're pine trees, right? So there's like snow built on top. Then you have like your autumn trees, which would be without any leaves, but kind of like some brownish leaves around. So if you're doing that, if you're doing your tree trunk, you always have to keep in mind what sort of tree you're sculpting. It's not like just randomly sculpt a trunk like I'm doing here, to my own fault, but you know. So, and go back to our clay buildup so you can see how useful this clay buildup is. So you can start tying in those ZSketch areas with that newly created clay buildup, and pressing Alt. You have something like this. And we're still gonna add branches, so this is not gonna look like this weird alien tree for long. Don't worry. And to add branches, I'm gonna do that right now just so I could show you. Just gonna mask that off, blur that mask a little bit. You could actually make the tree trunk this way as well. I could show you in another stream. Ha! There you go. There's always at least one mention of Majin Buu on the stream. Yeah. I mean, I can make this tree, the cam view, right? So I just keep that Majin Buu over there because it was one of the assignments that I posted back when I was studying at CGMA. So, and I liked it. So it was actually the first humanoid kind of sculpt that I really liked, because technically I don't really like a lot of my works. I feel that's kind of normal for artists, you know, not liking your own work. But this one for some reason I liked, and I'm a big Dragon Ball fan. I don't know if you've noticed. You know, let me see. Have you noticed that I'm a big Dragon Ball fan? So If you haven't noticed, newsflash, I am. so yeah, once I finished that, I actually enjoyed it, so I made it a cam view, and it's been there ever since. So yeah, let's just get on with this. So this is our mask over here, and for this I usually work with subdivisions. I go to a point where I'm working with subdivisions because it's easier to mask, to make like a really nice fall off with a lowest subdivision. So if we go over to FiberMesh, we have this little thing that we can actually create branches with FiberMesh. So let me just rule down the max fibers. I'm gonna make the length, make them way lengthier. And I'm gonna go over to the coverage. Where's the coverage? Coverage, and raise this up like crazy. I want this to have a profile of like 4. So it's like, it's actually has thickness, right? Maybe some more segments, like 6 segments. I don't want as many fibers, so it's okay if you go crazy on the geometry. You're gonna have like just a couple of them, right? So the color, I'm not really minding that, but we could do just, oh, come on. We could do just a basic kind of, you know, base, and then the tip right over here. I don't know, maybe something like that. I don't really care. And then the gravity, you want to invert this. So you're gonna have something like that, and maybe the twist. I want to add some more twists, and the revolve rate, and then some variation to that revolve rate. Maybe less fibers because we want this to be like a trunk, and then I want the width profile. I want it to be kind of like thicker on the base, and then less thick on the top, on the tip, right? So this is, again, it's curves in ZBrush, right? So, and we can make a fall off like that, something like that, like a nice curve over there. We can raise and lower this kind of anchor influence. So we'd have something like this, and then actually I want to make this even lengthier. And the coverage, where's coverage? There it is. So maybe less coverage a little bit. Yeah, because I don't want it to be that thick. I definitely want 0.01. I want less of these, not that less. Let me try something. And sometimes if you want to randomize this seed, you just tweak the max fibers a little bit. It's gonna randomize that on the fly. I'm gonna go like this. I want the gravity as well to have some variation, but not a lot. The gravity profile. So this is basically your simplified version of speed tree, in a sense, right? If you want. I feel like a lot of people use the FiberMesh feature to create like hair and sometimes create grass and foliage, but not a lot of them use it to actually create trees. You know, and it is there, and it could be used to create trees. So let's see, scale tip, I want this at 1 and 1. I don't want any weirdness, and I want this to have a cap actually over there. So I want to go to the width and see what I could do. So yeah, I don't want that to be like super thin, otherwise it's gonna give me some weirdness once I start subdividing it to sculpt, because I eventually want to sculpt this, right? And I'm gonna delete a couple of those anyway. But the cool thing about this is that you can actually have, let's say, 0.1. You can have like, whoops, not 0.1, 0.01. You can have just a few of them. And in this scenario, we can actually make the revolve rate a little less twist. And the tangent variation, I don't want any tangent variation. I want some clumps maybe. No, it's not gonna do anything. So yeah, let's say we have like this weird, like these weird trunks over here. Let me see what I can do a little bit more. coverage variation. Yeah, so you have something like this, and once you accept this and you make this an actual mesh, so you go over here and accept, ZBrush still knows it's a fiber mesh, right? So it has a different subtool. But what we can do now, and I showed you guys this last week, not last week, a couple weeks ago, is that you can come over here to masking, to our masking menu. Where's the masking menu? I'm not used to using the actual menu. There you go. And then you have mask by fibers, and you even have a profile, so you can tweak the fall off of that mask. And if you click fiber mask, it's going to give you a gradient from the bottom, like the root of the trunks of the branches to the tip. Now if I invert this, I can then go over to FiberMesh again and do more branches and go in a hierarchy kind of thing. So this is a tree already. You can see what's going on over here. So this is how you kind of, if you set your settings right in the first kind of layer of branches, then you can just set yourself up for success. You can just keep going and have all the little tweaks and all of that. And it's not a lot of geometry too, so you can just preview this, and if you don't like it, you can just, you know, get rid of it and then come back later. So yeah, this kind of works for what I want, right? So one other thing is that, okay, let's accept this first. And now one of the things that I did, I don't know if you guys remember, but I did a mask basically, so another fiber mask, and then inverted this and pressed Control W. So now we have the tips of those branches with the same polygroup. So now what I do usually is I use Nanomesh to create the big clumps of like the foliage, right? So the leaves and stuff. So I go to an IMM brush that I really enjoy, which is the IMM primitives, not the H one, that's an open mesh. So the IMM primitives, and I choose, let's say, this polysphere, which is a low poly kind of sphere. Oh, and before that, I need to turn this, of course, into a Nanomesh brush and go over to polysphere. And since this is its own kind of separate polygroup, what I want to go is I want to hover one of these faces, and I want to insert Nanomesh on polygroup all. So now if I do this, come on. Oh, there's a mask there, of course. If I do this, I'm inserting that sphere kind of everywhere, right? This is already looking weird. So the next step would be to come over here to Nanomesh on the top, and now you have a bunch of settings where you can tweak the actual formation of those clusters, right? So if we go over here and change the size, we're changing all the size. We can change the random distribution, so you can have some like random spheres over there. But since I'm just going to use this as sort of like a base to have like the silhouette of the tree, now I'm constantly looking at this now. It's a good idea to have your thumbnail over there and just rotate it around and see what's going on. And it's also a good idea to have some reference, which I don't, because I'm, you know, lazy. So what we can do is we can very slightly just add some variation to the width, to the length. So you can have like these weird looking bulges over here, so something like that. And we want to have basically this modulate by color. I'm not sure what it did. Nanomesh intensity polypaint. All right, yeah, it's if you had polypaint, which we could have, it would modulate by the color of the polypaint. I mean on the branches, of course. So if the topology that we draw the Nanomesh on had polypaint, it would modulate by that intensity, basically. So I'm gonna do some random rotation a little bit. So random rotation variation like that, and there you go. And one of the things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tile this by 2 by 2, and then I'm gonna change this pattern to like a checker pattern, and raise the size like crazy. So now we have our very basic silhouette over here. Random distribution, so you can see what is actually going on over here. Yeah, so we have some variation of the silhouette, which I kind of enjoy. And the cool thing about this is now that we can change this into, so this is already a low poly kind of, you know, mesh, but we don't want this to be, let's say, because we're going to use Nanomesh again, but with a custom mesh, like a leaf, right? So in this case, well, let me see. Oh, it's looking like a cherry ball tree. Yeah. Yeah, it's supposed to look like that at this stage. That's why I'm looking at this and trying to think of the overall silhouette first. And you can see this is maybe a little too much over here, but we can change that after the fact. So if we go to inventory and say there's one thing else that I'm missing. Random seed. No, it's not random seed. That was some, oh, alignment. That's right. So we're going to align this to normal. So basically aligning the mesh of our Nanomesh to the normal of the face where we've drawn the Nanomesh. So that's the thing. We can also align to the shortest edge, to the long edge, near edge. It's hard to tell because it's a huge mesh and it's been drawn on a very thin mesh. But you can randomize that, just align it to something. Or maybe no alignment. But in my case, I want align to normal. And now we want to make this mesh. So inventory, actually UVs, no UVs because it doesn't have UVs. So 1 to mesh. And now we have this as part of the same mesh, which I don't want. I want to split this. So Control Shift tap that. And I want to go over here, up here to subtool split hidden. Actually the other way around. I want to split hidden because I don't want to lose the history on the branches. Subtool. So now this one over here is going to be what we're working with. In this case now, what I want to do is I'm going to go over with an inflate brush. Whoops. The inflate brush and just start maybe deflating some of this. So something like this. And smoothing out the surface. Actually, no. Let me just smooth it out. There we go. Let me just do a dynamic subdivision so I can see what's going on. And one other thing that I really like to do in this scenario is I want to go to our gizmo and I want to remesh by union. So now it's kind of welded together. So it doesn't have as much geometry because there were a lot of these that were inside. So there were a lot of geometry inside its own, basically not being seen. So now we have like a watertight single mesh, which is exactly what we want. And yeah, so then we can start actually thinking about like maybe doing some poly grouping here, but for now let's just keep on. One of the things I also can do is actually turn on Sculptris Pro. Not for this one though. Trim dynamic, go over here, Sculptris Pro. And I want to actually, let me go to Sculptris Pro, subdivide size to like 0.2. Oh, it's the other way around. Sorry, of course, stupid. So 3. There we go. So I just want to make sure that these sections here are actually, doesn't have any weirdness there. So I'm just going over and just making this kind of one single, just going over with Sculptris Pro, just making it so make it actually, so you're making sure that it's actually welded and there's no like gaps in between them or whatever. I know it did, but sometimes there's like for example, a sphere that's kind of floating and it has like some weird spaces in between, especially if you're working for 3D printing. You want to make sure that there's no like vacuum it's vacuum watertight basically, the mesh. And also it helps break up that weird cherry ball tree effect that you guys were referring to. So we're just running it over with some Sculptris Pro like this. And I want to make, one of the other things I want to do right now, after the fact actually, is I want to project that detail over here. I want to use displacement maps because I already have some textures from Megascans that I use all the time to create a sense of foliage on my mesh. So I'm gonna do a ZRemesh, run a ZRemesh on this, create some very quick UVs using UV Master, and bringing some of those textures as displacement maps from Megascans. So you can also build your own. Again, like if you know Substance Designer, it's a very good skill to have as an environment artist, because it just creates some quick height maps in Substance Designer and bring them over. So you already have like your trees over here, you know, like it's kind of almost looking like a tree now, kind of. And we started with that little trunk, ZSpheres, right? So I have something like this. This is kind of weird over there, so I'm not sure I really like that. So I can just smooth brush and remove that. Could have something like this. Have like a little bit of a, actually we could still do, could actually smooth that section so it kind of deletes. So you have like your have a little piece of like foliage over there. Again, you're free to just keep sculpting with however you like. It's just that Sculptris Pro is super useful for stuff like this. I don't tend to change that too much, change the roundish shapes that the Nanomesh kind of comes up with those spheres, but sometimes I do. So sometimes I do change that. Have something like this. If you really want to get rid of that, you know, bulging volumes from the IMM Nanomesh brush, you just go a little harder on the smooth. Just smooth it instead of just using the trim dynamic. But also clay buildup as well. It's a nice brush. So go trim dynamic. I have the so yeah, we're gonna have, and we're still, like you see, it's actually reducing the geometry, the amount of geometry that we have, because we don't need, and this is all triangles. So one of the cool things that you can do is actually deflate this and then Dynamesh. So if we deflate this right now, let's go to deformation, and there was a presentation of the summit, guys from Final Fantasy were doing this with their demons for Final Fantasy 16, which is like, basically not this, it was decimation, but which is a little more irregular than this. But if you deflate this, in my case it's not gonna work because it's gonna shrink too much. Yeah, it's gonna shrink, it's not gonna work, whatever. But yeah, like after the fact we could do that, after the texturing and the surface noise. So yeah, like let's say this is fine for now. So we have something like this. There we go. Actually, there we go. All right, so I'm not sure I like that thingy over there. Actually, brush move topological. And now let's let's Dynamesh this. Whoa, that's a lot. Let's reduce this resolution. There we go. Let's go trim dynamic. There we go. All right, so we have something like this, and now what we can do is actually, let's tap this history. I always do that just for safekeeping, and go over to a geometry and just run it. Let me just save this real quick because you never know. You never know. Always be saving. There you go. So let's go to ZBrush and maybe no adaptive size, and I want to keep the same geometry, and I want to keep adaptive size, but I'm gonna do it like 10. There's no polygroups here, so I'm guessing, actually let me see if I can do something real quick, something like that. Let's see how this turned out. Ooh, that's gonna be ugly. Let me actually try something like that. Alright, it's a little better. That is completely and utterly unnecessary. That little hole over there. This is what you want to cover with your Sculptors Pro. Something like this, you know, that's not necessary to have a hole there. This is all going to be filled anyway. All right, so we have this section over there, and we want to do an auto groups over here because that's a little different as well. We want to run an auto groups over here as well, so that's also floating. So anything that's kind of like floating, it's gonna stay floating. So now you can do something like this. It's just to have some quick, you know, like UVs basically. So not worried about it being too clean. So now we wanna X, S, there we go. Now we want to do this. There we go. And we have another cut over there. All right, so this might be, let's keep groups, smooth groups down to 0.1 actually, and ZBrush this again. And now we're gonna have UVs. We're gonna actually run it by UV Master. There we go. All right, so I have those polygroups, which means I can go to UV Master, click polygroups, unwrap, and we're gonna have 7 shells. You can see there, and I'm gonna use that to use displacement maps. If it doesn't crash on me in the meantime. Wow, it's heating up my computer. Let's see. Yeah, today was kind of, anyone just jumping in right now onto the stream will look at this and go, wow, what the heck is he doing? Like, that's just abstract art right there. Any day now. Gonna go white. Sometimes It either takes too long or... 7 shells though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There should be 6, not 7. There we go. It's actually doing it. Yeah, because there's some of the shells might be a little weird because they might have like some weird pinching and stuff in the geometry, so it might take longer. Yeah, but a lot of this is actually just waiting for ZBrush to do its own thing, like ZRemesh, then UV Master. There's also like the extractor thing that takes its time. There we go. Now we have UVs. So now that we have UVs, we can actually subdivide and go up here, because you remember that I put a history marker over there. So I can go over here to project history. No, actually turn off color, project history. And now I can divide it again, project history. And once more. So I have 4 million polygons right now. It's kind of looking like it's a little weird. Like it has a lot of weird pinching. Let me turn off my Sculptors Pro, because if you change your topology, there goes your UVs. So no changing topology right now. So that's not the stage we're at. We can go over here and smooth this out and roll back our subdivisions. Alright, so what we want to do now is come over here, and first things first, you need to create a texture map. Otherwise your displacement maps won't work. So new texture, it's going to be our white one, and then just import a displacement map. And I'm going to import from my Megascans library, download it. I'm actually going to show you what I'm importing. I'm importing this little texture over here. Where is it? Oh, come on. Yeah, sometimes this app just forgets that I've signed in like 20 times today. It just signed me out. Sign in. There you go. And it especially make sure that this app doesn't really work that well because it's integrated now in Unreal Engine 5.3. But if you use the app, be sure to open the Epic Games Launcher first. That usually works better for signing in. So I have this little surface over here. Purchased, where is it? Local, there it is. So these two are the ones that I downloaded. These two over here. Yeah, Megascans. So I'm using the Quixel Bridge, which is basically your hub to get these assets, right? So I got one of these and brought them in. So let's go surface, and it's one of these. So it's either this one or this one. I actually prefer this one. So you have the albedo here. This is the same one I did for the other tree. So, but the displacement map, you usually want this EXR, or you want a JPEG actually, but it doesn't matter because it's still gonna get you some wonky results. So let's up the intensity so you can see what's going on. Huh. There's no UVs there for some reason. Let me turn this off and roll back the subdivisions. And let me flatten this. Actually, I'm gonna work on clone, and I'm gonna go and where is the thingy? Check seams. Huh. Okay. Yeah, so some of these don't have, for some reason, don't have UVs. They do though. 5, 6. There were 7 shells, right? Oh, it's that tiny one. Come on. Should have made this even lower poly. Let me go back to this one. Roll to the clay. Let me go back actually to where it was. So that one's easy to unfold. I could actually unfold that manually. We can also try using the morph, the UV map over here, so we can actually do a crease PG and then just cut based on the creases. So let's crease PG and go to create unwrap, and I want to crease edges unwrap. There we go. But it doesn't have UVs. That is weird. Operation cancelled. Let me see something real quick. So when it's not working the way you want it, be sure to go over here to geometry, mesh integrity, and check mesh integrity. It's fine. It should work. Let me actually delete. Huh. This is weird indeed. It has subdivisions. It's like they're frozen. Let me run UV master again. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, Joey. It's taking a little longer than I expected. But the cool thing is that since we have subdivisions now, we can actually use this topology to create another nanomesh with some leaves. I have that mesh prepared over here as well. This is taking too long. It's taking too long because it's not properly done. I didn't cut the UVs like I should, but it's fine. It's going. I can see it's my CPU heating up because it's red. My computer turns red when it's heating up. Alright, so we should have UVs now. There you go. So it should work. Let me just grab a quick texture map. No, it's not though. It's not like this section over here for some reason it's not getting the UVs that it should. No, it is. No, it isn't. Sorry. I take that back. It isn't. You can see it's not getting that displacement. It's not going to get that displacement over there. It's like the UVs are all... Like if I morph this... Oh, right. It didn't unfold properly. It's just tiny. this tiny island over there. So what if I just scale it up like that, and then morph it back? Nope. Let me flatten this. This should be, well, I'm not gonna waste you guys time anymore because this is just weird. Let's see what's going on. It's not unfolding properly. It's basically, I might need another seam. So unflatten, turn texture on. It's a little better, but it's still like all weird and stuff. But I mean, that's besides the point. I just want to show you guys. I mean, I could just come over here and then just do another cut. As you can see, like this is very hard for the software to actually unfold. It's kind of impossible, actually. It might be the reason why it was taking too long. My specs, I'm actually planning on doing a video on that. My specs are, I have a Radeon RX 6750 XT, which is the equivalent of like a 3070, I guess. And basically, I have a CPU that's an AMD Ryzen 7950X, which is the new ones, and 64 gigs of RAM, so it's not a PC spec issue. And it's an SSD M2 running ZBrush. So yeah, it's just that it's impossible to unfold this the way that I wanted, but it's okay, doesn't matter. I'm gonna import actually that texture so I can see what's going on. And we could also use surface noise as well, but it's okay. Texture on, and let's get that displacement. There we go. We could also actually use surface noise for this, since it has UVs. It's just that it's too small. Alright, ZBrush unwrap it again. Yeah, I could just cut this even better, because this is impossible to unfold. It's closed off in that area, so that's going to be pinching. That whole section when flattened is going to be pinching. This whole section is going to be pinched because it is tied there by a slight margin, but it is. So, but this doesn't matter because this is going to be the base, right? So it's going to be, whoa, what the heck? Yeah, I don't need this. So this is just going to be the base for it. What the hell is that? There we go. So if this is the base, what we're gonna have next is actually, before that, I actually want to tweak this texture over here. So I actually want to import this, or we could make this. No, you can't actually. So I want to import that texture here before we actually bring it over there. So I want to go over to texture. I want to change this texture, so I'm going to select it, and I can adjust colors, and I'm going to change the hue ever so slightly, just a little bit, maybe some more saturation, and the intensity as well, just a little bit. And let's give it some more green intensity, some less red, so we can hide those little tweaks over there. We can get some more contrast on the greens, and we can tint this, maybe tint it like so, and then overall we should be able to no, let's do okay. So if we do okay, you can see it's a little different now. It's gonna be overblown. There was a way here to change the levels. Oh, doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna bring that one in. It's a little more colorful. It's all weird, and so what we can do now, since this is very low poly-ish kind of geometry, we can go over. I made a mesh here for you guys, so it's basically just a leaf, a couple of leaves actually, and I want to make this into a nanomesh actually. So I have 2 leaves, so we can make as many as we want, decimated, so they're fairly low poly. I'm gonna change the name of this, so I'm gonna rename this leaf 2, and I'm gonna rename this leaf 1. And now I'm gonna make insert multi-mesh from these. So I have leaf 1, leaf 2, and now I'm gonna convert this into a nanomesh. And if I go back, we can just for now turn off the texture, and we can go over here and insert to all polygons, and I'm gonna insert this leaf everywhere, right? It's gonna start lagging because there's a lot of leaves. That's a lot of leaves. So what we can do now is go over here to our Nanomesh menu and just change the random distribution, change the size. Random distribution should be higher, but not as high. Something like that. And the tiling, we want to tile this maybe twice. And I want to change the pattern, and I want to make it fit, or maybe fill the polygons, or maybe proportional. Keep it proportional, I think. And now what we can do is rotate this on the X axis. Whoa, careful. I don't think it's the X though. Z, no, not the Z. It's definitely the X. Yeah, it's just minus. No, oh, come on. It's an American keyboard, sometimes changes. Yeah, I want a X rotation minus 90 degrees. And then I want to up the size a little bit, and random distribution, something like this. And now the X rotation, I want some variation, but I also want some Y rotation and some variation on that as well. And the Z offset, because it's too embedded, I want the Z, not the Z, I'm sorry, Y offset just a little bit. And this rotation shouldn't be that harsh. Should have something like this. And then we can actually have some size variation as well. Same thing with the previous Nanomesh that we did. So the X offset actually, and the height. Okay, so one of the things that's not helping is the fact that this other mesh underneath it doesn't have any kind of displacement to it. So what we can do is actually duplicate this and then remove the Nanomesh for this one. And in this scenario, what we want to do is actually use the displacement as surface noise with the UVs, and we can have, you can see it's not actually working that well there. And we don't want to mix this. We want alpha scale to be like that, no relative. I want to have something like this. We want to multiply this basic noise. We can also use some actual, like the new noises, like Maxon noises. I really like this one, Sigma noise. I just do a, I just remove the alpha right now. I do the plugin. Yeah, something like that. And we're gonna do the new Maxon noises, which is Cinema 4D noises in ZBrush. And I really like the SEMA one, but not for this though. Is it the SEMA? Poxo. I think that was it. Let me do maybe less octaves. And now I want to mix that with the alpha. So if I go in and then do mix and do min maybe. I want to do something like this. Yeah, something like that. Just so it has some noise over there. So yeah, so now we have, effectively we have some leaves. These leaves are still a little weird, so I might just change this. I actually want to do some variation over here on the rotation. Let me change this to 0. Change this back to 0 so I can see what's going on. So we can rotate this to minus something like that. And then rotate it just a little bit and have some variation. And rotate this like that, some variation. And we might want the random distribution to be we try not to tile this and scale it down a little bit. Or maybe I can tile this 3 times and scale it up. And this could be align to normal. There we go. So let's go back to our rotation. Let's put it back to 0. So you can see we could have made the IMM already in the orientation, the correct orientation, right? So if we align to shortest edge, let's see. Point order. Random edge. No, I don't want random. It's aligned to normal. And then just rotate it. Minus. Rotate it a little bit. Rotate it a little bit. Well, effectively, this is kind of the way you want to go for. Especially, you want to keep it sort of embedded, not a lot. So you could have like all these leaves like clipping through. So then you do like a remesh by union. Yeah, I know. That's it's still looking weird. I need to figure this out basically. So I might need to actually make the IMM in the correct orientation. Just do align to normal, and that's it. So because I captured it from up top, right? So if we did this like that, basically. So if I go over here and I capture the meshes like this, right? And I go over here and I go insert multi-mesh, and I go create Nanomesh brush, and now I do the same thing. So I can go over here and go on this polygon over here and do all polygons and just redo this, but it's already aligned basically to that. So now what we can do, yeah, it's clipping through, so that's why. And it's also has an issue with the normals though. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, for some reason the normals are looking weird. But it's okay. And now we want to go over to... Wait a second. Let me see the surface. I turn off Nanomesh just for a second. Oh right, I'm not. I'm stupid. Sorry. There we go. Now we have this, and now what we can do is do the random distribution thing. It should be pointing up. You're right. It's not pointing up. It should be pointing basically out, right? So the alternative to this would actually be to do mesh cards, right? But we don't want to have mesh cards. We want to have the idea of having leaves around, and then you'd have your texture as well. So align to normal, and let's just do the rotation like that. Just a little bit of rotation, and then some variation to the other side, and then just a little bit of that rotation. If we don't do variation, we can also just do it, you know, just rotate it all into the same side. So some variation over here, variation over there, and we want this to be bigger. So you'd have effectively something like this, right? So maybe less random distribution. There we go. So if we have something like this, actually this is too much. That's something like this, plus we get that surface noise working. We get, let's do one to mesh. So now if we split this into its own, this is already like 13 million. You can see it's like way over the top. But we're gonna eventually do a surface noise or displacement. So let's mask this, turn off the line so I can see what I'm doing. Just invert this. And is this masked? Yes, it's masked. Cool. So we can do surface noise. Where's the surface noise? I don't know if this is gonna work though. Yeah, it's not gonna work. I need to split this. So I'm gonna split hidden. There we go. And if this is split and we want these blobs, just divide this, divide, and divide again, and now this needs to get the displacement or surface noise. Actually, I'm just gonna do some generic surface noise because I know it's not working properly. I just do generic plugin noise. Let's use the Maxon, the new Maxon noises. So let's go and do that. That's also cool. So let me reset this curve, and I'm gonna edit, and I'm gonna figure out if one of these noises works for me. Actually, this wavy I think kind of works for me. And let's just do small. Alright. And let's mix some basic noise, and let's mix it up like that. And there we go. Let's mix it a little more. Multiplying. Let's change this. Let's see if we can get something a little different. Salvornoi. Actually, let's go wavy, but change the seed. Like the random seed. There we go. But it's not ideal though, because it doesn't have that noise. Yeah, I might need to do this after the fact. Just do the UVs again. Let's not mix that much noise in there. And now, if we put in just this little color over here, let's just do some color. This should have polypaint though, that whole thing, because it has like the actual original mesh has polypaint. So for some reason this, actually we need to turn on the colorize button maybe. Yeah, this wasn't turned on, so there's your color. There we go. And we want to have that surface noise, and we want to switch color, and this color should be green as well, a deeper green, and reverse. And now we want to go to the surface noise, and we want to blend that color, actually blend it in. So now if we apply this, this isn't ideal. Again, I should have the texture working, but apply the mesh, and we can even mask by noise, inverse this, and have like a brighter kind of green. Actually, that's too bright. Let's try. Yeah, that's too bright. So let's do actually something like this, like a yellowish green. It's still too bright. Fill object, mask by noise, reverse that, and fill object. I mean, I guess that works, kinda. So let's go white again. Yeah, but this is kind of like the base workflow, right? We still have those leaves over there clipping through. Then you want to make a union there so it doesn't feel like this with brick might be. No, not necessarily. It depends. Depends on what you want to do, and it depends how the leaves look, basically. So if we go and look at my example, my previous example that I did yesterday, this one over here, you can see the fibers kind of work better. And it's not just the fibers, but the fibers, the actual texture here, you can see it working with the noise. Well, it's too stretched, but you still see it working. Kind of works for the effect that we're going for. And mix that with the foliage, with the leaves, and you get a nice, cool looking effect, right? And then you have to keep in mind that this is going to be, if this is going to be printed, then this needs to be painted on. So, you know, you either have one of those printers that actually prints polypaint, like colorized polypaint, or and if that's the case, then you don't want to use textures, or you could use texture and then bake that into the polypaint, which that could work actually, like paint from texture. And but ideally you would want to have like just a blocky kind of mesh, you know, and with the color as flat as possible, but still work. And this is just a small example of how the trees could work. This tree isn't even up to concept. Like if you look at the concept, that's not what it's supposed to look like. But on the grand scheme of things, in the actual environment that you see over here, what we can do, I have some array things here. We can actually have just a single tree and rotate it around, and we have just a slight, like a very small kind of forest area over there. And we're up to 50 million polygons already. And it's array mesh, so if we make that an actual mesh. But yeah, so this is how I usually go about making trees for small dioramas in ZBrush. It's not like, if I was to do this for games, it would be a little different. The ZBrush section would be more focused on creating the atlases for like the leaves, the clusters, maybe some twigs with so those atlas, then those models are going to be baked into a texture, and that's going to be your kind of texture atlas for then you could texture that in Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and then you could actually use those to texture cards, basically. So cluster cards and leaf cards, and you can do that with FiberMesh and ZBrush. But for something that you want to have a lot of repeatability and reusability in an actual environment, you want to use something like SpeedTree for that. You want to go like procedural, right? So 2 a.m. Wow. Okay. Thank you for joining us, though. Wow, that's crazy. It's 2 a.m. I feel honored that you guys are watching me, and it's like 2 a.m. Thank you. Have a good evening, sir, or madam. I don't know. I don't know who's behind the screen. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So this has been my small little tree demo. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope we can keep going with this. I mean, I just want to sculpt these rocks a little bit and maybe have that whole spaceship with a lot more detail. This also has live booleans, so I can turn on live booleans and you can see there's some stuff there. You can barely see because it's small compared to the rest. So the idea is to have a cool little render here, so we can use these trees for decimation and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna start a new environment after this one, and I don't know what the next stream will be. If I finish this up, we're gonna start a new environment. If not, then we're gonna do the detailing on this one. We're gonna finish this up, and then we're gonna follow up on the characters here. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was useful to any of you wanting to do some environment art in ZBrush, and I'll see you guys next week. I'm gonna post on the chat, by the way. I forgot to post on the chat my links, so if you guys want to follow me on other socials and the Discord server. I don't know if people were here before joined. There are already people joining. So yeah, join us on our Discord server and follow me on socials, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye. See you later.